Okay, my darling, Shemiah.
Hey.
Hi, honey. So, my darling friend Shemiah, thank you for being here to talk about the Strong Black Woman Archetype and your road to healing, really. So, a quick introduction to you. Shemiah, you're a mother of one, a freelance florist, and a devout Christian.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I asked you was, well, you love a chat like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really, though, I think we have had so many insightful healing conversations about life, about healing, about the challenges we face. And what I value is that it's always rooted in love, honor, respect. And, we've managed to create a space for each other, which I think is it can be rare, especially in sisterhood.
Yeah.
And actually what made me laugh when I first spoke to you about doing this, I mentioned the word resilience and you was like, God, take the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And you said, I hate the word and I never want to be called resilient.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such an awesome starting point because to me it meant that you had a story and one that I definitely wanted to hear.
Yeah.
I think that you've got such a positive outlook on life, positive mindset, and no, I really appreciate that because especially in these times, it's hard. It's hard to hold that, and that's okay. We're going through a pandemic, right? That's never been experienced before, and so one thing that you said to me was that you believe in keeping it very real and being honest about where you are in life and in terms of your healing. And I value that. And you said about things being rooted in shame and guilt. And that for me is so powerful. And hopefully we can touch on that a bit later on. And I think what is awesome about bringing in your perspective on this topic is that, you're a mother of one and, that healing journey really had to come into place when you chose to step away from that relationship that was unhealthy and be a single parent, and the idea that you had to do it well and do it independently. So I think that makes for some really insightful conversation around, what happens when we come up with challenge and how we ask for help. So what I'm going to do first is just read you a little blog post that I wrote just around this topic, and then hopefully we can take it from there. Okay. So, how many women in our family line can we recognize as strong Black women? What are some of the similarities in their personalities that we believe qualify them as a strong Black woman? For me, I look at my mother, grandmother, and aunties, and I see how they are the dominating forces within their households. They are the captains of their ships, and they know all the goings on within each deck. The kitchens, the command centers, they're thriving. The staff, husbands, partners, and children fall in line with their commands. There is order and things have their place. They appear well-dressed and hygienically maintained. They are a little impatient and intolerant. They are somewhat stressed at the intensity of their role, and there is some overwhelm by their to-do list. They are tired. They moan about not being heard. They complain that the people them don't know how to do the thing properly, so they must do it themselves. They serve their community, always available if someone needs them. They conceal their pain, and they deny they have any other needs. I was talking to my mom the other day about the Strong Black Woman Archetype, and it was such a revealing, healing, and wholesome conversation in sharing how her role as a strong Black woman informed my own strong Black woman template. She reflected on how her mother was also affected by the strong Black woman traits and how she witnessed her maintain this role at the cost of her mental health. You see, my grandmother was the matriarch of the family. Her door was always open, like literally always open. She never locked her front door. She always had food cooking on the stove in case someone stopped by and was hungry. I remember many days coming home from school and there would be a stranger at her dining table, tucking into something that she'd cooked. Oftentimes it was someone in need, usually homeless, but definitely starving. How she was in servitude to others, but did not meet her own needs well. As provider for her husband, children, her church, and community, she prided herself on how she carried herself. How she was in servitude to others, how she carried herself. There was the idea that to be strong meant to have no needs, to have it all together. One of the ways in which being a strong Black woman has incapacitated me is in the way in which I serve myself, or the lack thereof. You see, being a strong Black woman means that any needs I have, I must fulfill myself. Whilst this has some truth, the very foundation of that is steeped in shame and guilt, and the notion that I must manage my portion without complaint. But I have watched the women who came before me do it, and I must learn to do the same. However, it wasn't until my grandmother transitioned to spirit did I realize that while she cleverly concealed her needs, wants, and desires within serving others, she left this world without really identifying or asking for what she needed. Whether that be support, help within the home, shopping, raising her children, getting to church. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a slight possibility that she conversed with friends about her true needs, but I doubt it, as her pride was in her appearance. Leading with a mask of having it all together, she was missing the very real connection which could have been available to her. There was isolation, loneliness. Her goings on at home were never on display nor up for discussion. And these conversations were not had within the family unit. I mean, can you imagine if they were? The sharing of teachings and wisdom that could have been. Anyway, there's something about being a strong Black woman and denying me have any needs, and I can't help but wonder what that's about. So as I search within my well of experience on being a strong Black woman and question what arises for me when I deny my own needs, I find shame and guilt. Shame and guilt. Shame and guilt at the pandemic. You know, there's shame for not being able to fulfill my role, shame in admitting that I have failed tremendously, but I don't have it all together and need help. Guilt for bringing shame on the family, guilt that I am not living up to the expectation of those who set the bar. I have to ask, whose guilt and shame is this? I wonder how my nan was able to satiate her own starvation while she was busy filling the bellies of others. What were the hunger pangs calling for? Because I noticed she did not eat with everyone else. And when she did eat, it was often a small little side plate or she would pick at the fruit.
Yeah.
They call the command center of the ship a bridge. This is fascinating to me as I continue to use the ship metaphor here. The bridge is the kitchen in my maternal lineage. It is where the captain lives pretty much. I mean, I know I do. Food is served there. Advice, or rather orders, are given, punishments too. Gossip, betrayal, and deceit also congregate there from time to time. Conflict and prayer also meet there. My grandmother was the bridge also. She brought our individual worlds together, and although they collided often, we knew this was the place for that to happen. But who supports the bridge? Who is responsible for the structural maintenance to ensure its durability, reliability, and safety? Surely there is an impact from wear and tear and high traffic use. There is something about the lack of conversation around the realities of being a captain and maintaining a ship, the realities of being a strong Black woman, the truth about the impact on what the striving to be a strong Black woman can have on one's livelihood. The lie says to have strength is to have no needs, when the truth lies in the complete opposite. You see, in having needs, we are human. In having needs and expressing our needs, we become strong. We become the embodiment of strength itself. In having no needs, there is isolation. Looking after other people before yourself means that you're always giving to yourself from a place of deficit. In fact, you are already in deficit serving others because you have not served yourself first. So how do you give and serve, but remember to give to yourself first? And I think, we have to admit that we have needs and realize that our needs are important and we are worthy of having those needs met.
Wow. I almost feel like everything you have said, again, I can completely resonate with. I mean, in our family, my grandmother was like the praying warrior. So literally, I mean, there's more females in our family than there are males. Um, and it's unfortunate because I mean, some of the males in our family passed away at really young ages. So it's always kind of felt, or fell to the women in our family to pick up, the ropes and just keep going. And I think that's where my strong Black woman sort of resilience comes from. Again, I was raised in a single parent household. I've got very like not many memories of like having much of a relationship with my dad, and in any memories that I do have, they weren't very positive like experiences. So I feel like in my adult life, especially as becoming a mother, I've just done what my mother's done, because if it's not, broken, why fix it? That has definitely created problems, because my mum, while she's an absolutely amazing woman, probably struggles sometimes to say, yeah, I need help. Yeah, I need support. So unless you're someone who's very intuitive, like myself, and, my other siblings, she could honestly need support and no one would necessarily, do you know what I mean? Just, step in to support her unless you know. I feel like the whole idea of being a strong Black woman, initially in my younger years, I thought was an absolutely amazing, great concept. And I was like, yep, that's me, not a problem. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a Beyonce fan, like I've been to the concerts, I listen to the music, I still play it in my house. However, I must admit, again, I don't know if it's just, when I became a mother, that interdependence is so much more necessary than independence. Like you said, independence for me means isolation. It means I can do it all by myself. And for me, I feel like, especially when I split up from my daughter's dad, I had something to prove. Nobody else really put those pressures on myself, other than myself. But I had something to prove, because I'm Shemiah and I can do it all. And again, it's what I know, and it's only what I've seen. So if they can do it, why can't I do it? God forbid struggle. But as you know, in the earlier days, when we used to speak, I blatantly had breakdowns. I didn't necessarily vocalize them because I didn't feel like there was a safe space for me to necessarily do that. And because I always present well, I'm always, well, I think I present well anyway, like look well, and my daughter would look well. No one really knew what was going on necessarily in my mind until it got to, the absolute cusp. And I was like, oh, I can't do anymore. Like it's too much. And then it would be floods of emotion. So I think now my thought process is I always question why I believe what I believe. How does that benefit me? And is there balance in it? I'm very big on balance because I am someone who likes to serve. I'm also someone who likes to be there for other people continuously. But like you said, if I'm continuously doing that, how can I literally pour into myself? There is nothing left.
Exactly.
So, I don't like the word resilience because it's that idea of, I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going. And for me, I've done that and I burn out. And when I burn out, I'll cut off. I don't want to speak to nobody. And I literally cease to function. And it's just really unhealthy. I think the lack of male figures that I've had in my life has meant that when males are present, I don't really understand what purpose you serve. Because unless you're somebody who is very, and I don't like the word, but I feel like people understand it more when you say it. But unless you're a male that's very alpha and literally says, Shemiah, go and sit down, I can do, naturally, I will be in the kitchen. I will fix the car. I will, go to the shop and do the shopping and come back and, unpack all of the shopping. And then I'll sort of deal with the kids. And then I'll sit down and I'm like, yeah, I'm exhausted. even if the help is there, unless you are somebody who is very alpha and is going to say, Shemiah, I got this, I don't ask. And it's hard. It's really hard.
That's so interesting that you use the word alpha as well, you know. What does that, like, what, let's look at that for a minute, actually, because that resonates for me too, you know, at a point where I felt that I mean, I've been the captain of my ship for a long time, do you know what I mean? And I also had that idea that I need a man to be able to tell me, because if they can't, then they ain't going to survive this, you know? But I guess, I mean, for you, like, what does that mean? What does that mean to have someone who is an alpha? What is that?
So for me, I see it as someone who can govern my house, someone who I suppose is quite aggressive in demeanor, and that's not necessarily the right way to think of it, but that's how my brain processes it. So it's someone who can be an authority figure who is very sure of themselves. And in my mind, I feel like for me as a woman, that makes sense because my small interactions that I have had with, I suppose, my dad, that's how he was. So it was a bit like, well, you know, if you are a man, then that's how it's supposed to be. I haven't necessarily had, you know, men in my life that have got a very subtle approach. They're very like, I know what I'm doing, I don't need to be told, and I'm present. So I think I've just for a long time I've shied away from relationships because I'm a bit like, I don't even know what I'm navigating, like what I'm supposed to be looking for. But I'm also very aware that actually that approach of that aggressive sort of type, whilst I used to be attracted to that, that's no longer what I want. But then saying that, if I find someone who is a lot more subtle, I find it quite hard to respect that person in authority, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense.
Because I don't know, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't make sense. If you're quite passive, I just don't get it. Whilst it's great, I suppose, like on a friendship level, if it's something that someone I've wanted to pursue something with romantically, it just doesn't work. So for me, I like to have lots of conversations about why my thinking is like that, and also moving forward, how do we change that? Because ultimately, what then ends up happening is that if I'm having a conversation with someone who is quite aggressive and they challenge me, I then become very defensive, and I'm also then aggressive. Not physically, but definitely in my tone and my approach. And it's almost like, well, you can't conquer me, like it's not going to happen, and we just don't get anywhere. But I mean, it's still something that I'm working through, I'm working on, and I feel like I've just had to constantly change why I believe and why I think the things that I think, and actually thinking in that way, how has that helped me to this point? So if that answers the question, I feel like I'm really.
No, it really does. Thank you so much for that. That's amazing, and it's also amazing to have that insight and really have that ability to self-inquire and question, because I feel like that's what it's about. How do we grow otherwise? How do we, heal the parts that are no longer serving? How do we know when to say, okay, that's not who I want to be anymore, and this is who I do want to be, and step into that? You touched on your dad earlier, which I think is also quite powerful, and you said that he, what little you did know of him, he had an aggressive way, and I think it's so interesting how that has impacted in a way that the partners that you're saying that you need and want, and also the idea of needing to be aggressive. I resonate with that. I've had, in the past, I've also needed to have that aggressive way. And for me, it was because why did I need to have the aggression? I think it was hard for me to ask for what I needed. And I needed them to, that aggression showed me that they could handle the things that I'm trying to hold. They could handle all of the, anything that I feel that I'm bearing and holding. That aggression symbolized manhood, symbolized strength, and it meant that they could bear it. And I needed somebody to show me they could bear it, because if you didn't, then there was no trust. Yeah. And it didn't, and for me, the trust comes from safety. Yeah. You know. So just in going back to your dad, what do you think his relationship was? I know you didn't know him very well, but just from what you did know, his relationship was with resilience.
Honestly, I don't even think I can even answer the question, because
that's fine.
I just feel like any interaction that I ever had with him, it was literally an aggressive sort of interaction. So I couldn't even tell you things necessarily about him, because I just don't know. All I know is that if I approached or ever asked a question, everything was very short and tempered. So I couldn't even expand on that, and it's a shame, because I now think that, well, simply the lack of interactions that I had with my dad has definitely shaped my future, in the sense where I'm naturally very close to females, very apprehensive with guys, and they always, I suppose, get the 20 questions before, do you know what I mean? Like the 20 questions always like, what are your intentions? You know, like, and it's almost like a checklist. Yeah. And I physically don't have it, but mentally it's there. And it's like, well, if you can't meet this, that, and that, then you serve no purpose here. And it's a very negative way to see things and treat people. Like you said, like, we are humans, we have feelings, but it's almost as if I detach that from them. It's perfectly fine for us females to have feelings, but for them, it's almost like, but you're a man, just handle it. And that's wrong. Yeah, that's wrong. And I can admit that that's definitely wrong. I definitely think I've changed in terms of how I handle them and relationships and stuff that I have. Am I still weary? 1000%. Yeah.
What do you think makes you feel wary?
Not knowing if I can trust them with how I feel. I'm a very sensitive person. And sometimes I feel like if my emotions are too much, how does that, make them feel, or how does that make them feel about myself? How do they then view me? Because naturally, I've had people say to me, in particular men, they're just like, Shemiah, you've got it all together. You don't need anyone. And I'm like, how is it that I'm giving that off? Is it because you perceive me to be very organized? Is it because, the interactions that I have with my daughter, they seem not quite structured, and I'm here and I'm there and I'm always on the go. And I always seem like, although I'm juggling all of these balls, I can do it. Or is that me coping? And I think for me, it's probably me coping, because I feel like I have to be seen to be doing stuff and have it all under control. Because if I've ever needed someone to step in, I haven't had it, and it's not an option, and I just have to keep going. Wow. So it's really interesting how people see stuff, because how people perceive me and how I view myself is two completely different things. So yeah. Wow. But I'm not very, it takes me a long time to open up. And I only feel like I open up to people if I feel like I can trust them. And trust is a big thing for me. So yeah, it takes a long time. And I think if people are invested in you or the friendship, then that will take time. But I am not necessarily the easiest person to really go deep and talk about things that really bother me. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because within that you said about handling your big emotions.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, can you expand on that a little bit in terms of what you mean by big emotions?
So I'm definitely a big crier. And I feel like if I ever, crying for me is a release, a little bit in the same way where singing is a release for me. And I feel like if I've ever broken down or cried for like long periods of time, I feel like whoever I've been around, if it's been a male, it's too much for them to handle. And because it's been received in that way, I don't necessarily feel safe to express myself in that way. So crying is something I do very privately. And it creates a barrier if I'm in a relationship with someone, because I'm unable to show vulnerability when really I'm really vulnerable, and I can be quite open in that. However, expressing that in front of you is almost something that I just won't do. And I think how it then probably plays out is, you know, I'll do it on my own, it's fine, and I'm very, like, I suppose aggressive, and it's just like, it's fine, I can't depend on you to do that, so I'll just do it myself, and it just gets done. When really what I want is the complete opposite, for someone to say, Shemiah, it's all right to not always have it together. If you need to express yourself, express yourself. But I feel like the numerous failed attempts of me being able to be vulnerable and being present with someone who can handle that has happened so many times that actually it's something I just keep on my private space. And also I feel like my sensitivity has always been viewed as something negative. So it's almost something I want to keep really private. Because I've always heard that, oh, you're too sensitive, you need to, toughen up. But I feel like it's because of my sensitivity and my vulnerability that makes me so personable with people. And it makes it really easy to, reach out and people to connect. But I don't know. I just, I try to stay myself and true to myself, and hope that with the people that I connect with, they get it. And it's few and far between, but the people that I do connect with and understand it, the friendships last long. So
I get it, and I get you. I really do. And I think the key word there being vulnerability.
Yep.
And I find that the messaging for me with vulnerability was that it equaled weakness. Vulnerability didn't allow for strength.
Yeah.
And, I feel like actually in my vulnerable moments, I was the strongest.
Yeah.
There needs to be a level of safety.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, when people say to you, you're too sensitive, or you're too this, or you're too that,
yeah,
yes, we're going to go into retracting that, and we're going to be like, well, I'm too much. I'm too much. Who's going to be able to handle me?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah? And actually, you're going to have to prove that you can handle me now, because I've now built this wall. I'm keeping my too muchness safe to myself.
Yeah.
And you need to prove to me that you can break this wall down and access it.
Yep.
And I wonder where those messages come from, though. Who is telling us we're too much?
Who is telling us that we're too much? Sometimes it's been friendships, but also probably family. My family. I mean, God love them, and I do love them a lot. But yeah, they definitely said, "Oh, Shemiah, you're too sensitive," or that's all it's ever been. Oh, Shemiah, you're too sensitive. So it's definitely been perceived as something that is negative. So I'm like, all right. I mean, I can only be myself. So yeah, it's one of the two. It's either I'm too sensitive and I'm really vulnerable and I want to cry, or it's nothing. I won't speak. I'll just, isolate and keep myself to myself, which then becomes a problem because obviously, as we have learned in this pandemic, isolation isn't good for
Absolutely.
anyone. It isn't. And I think, again, when you are a parent and a single parent, having conversations is really important, because whilst you're, being the best parent possible, you also need to have a conversation. It's not even sometimes necessarily that you need to offload, but you need adult interaction. And for me, that's probably why I live on the phone. People call me, oh, Shemiah, I can't get through because, on the phone. Yeah, because I need to speak. I have to speak to someone, or else, you start. I've seen some parents do it, and it's not a judgment. However, I don't choose to parent in that way, where they're having conversations with their children about very adult topics, and it becomes very heavy, and the child is not left to be a child. And I think it's a very short period of time that they are children. Allow them to be as free-spirited and, worry-free for as long as possible. But I also understand that that's really hard to do sometimes. But again, for me, it's about balance. I feel like me reconnecting with God recently, and when I say recently, I mean like taking my spiritual walk probably a lot more serious in the last two or 3 years now. I feel like I've gone back to square one, because I was thinking about times when I was at my happiest, and I was brought up in church. So for me, I feel like I've just gone back to where I needed to be. And it's something that's very personal. I can't say, any of my family members go there, so sometimes I feel like people will do stuff because it's where all their friends are or all their connections are. For me, it's not. But I definitely, I suppose I'm a little bit like my grandmother. I'm definitely a prayer warrior, because in that space, it's safe. There's no one else there, and I can be completely vulnerable as I need to be, and it's left there. And I always feel like after I've, communed with God, or, and just had a conversation, I'm never judged. It's private and it's left there, which means I can move on and I just feel lighter. So for me, that's, and it's taken a long time to find out what works for me. Because I am someone who likes to talk, and I am someone who would normally just pick up the phone and have a conversation. And whilst there is, a time and a space for that, it still wasn't giving me the relief that I needed.
Yeah.
And for me, prayer does that. So now I center myself and my lifestyle around people who have, a similar belief, and they're like-minded, because they just get it. I'll be honest, at the moment, it feels at times like a little bit of a lonely journey, because it's very separate to what I'm used to. However, I'm definitely at my happiest and I'm calm. I didn't realize I had anxiety, and even now I don't necessarily have a diagnosis, but how I used to operate my life before, I was always anxious. I couldn't just relax. Now it's normally coupled with a cup of tea at home and quiet. But I'm a lot less anxious than what I was before. And that for me is a good space, because especially when we're living in London, it's the constant running up and down. If your child has activities like mine does, you're always at one place and then another. And for me now, I've just slowed it in some respect right down in terms of my priority. Do I have to be at that place all the time? Every invitation that comes my way, again, because I'm a socialite and personable, people naturally will invite you to stuff. But I'm learning, and I say I'm learning because it's something I'm working at all the time, to say no. Actually, I'm not coming and I'm not being present. And I struggle, because I do like to be out.
That's a big
but
one.
It has to be done. It honestly has to be done. And I'm getting comfortable just being and being on my own. Yeah. Gosh,
Wow.
I said a lot.
No, that was really powerful. There was so much in there. I'm like, oh yes. You know, no, don't apologize. This is what this is about. You know, it's conversation. You know, and I feel like I loved what you said about finding God and you know, finding a safe space to be you. Yeah, because being vulnerable and being sensitive is parts of who you are, you know, and we deserve to be in spaces that acknowledge all of our parts, you know, and to the fact that you found somewhere where you can feel safe to be you is amazing. And I think that's what we're all striving for is safety within our relationships, within the spaces that we go into, so that we can just be ourselves and without judgment, you know. How do we support ourselves in places that have judgment? Because judgment, hey, it lives everywhere, right? It lives within us too. And I think something about that is key in how we speak to ourselves about who we are, you know. And you talked about, you know, finding that balance and your daughter and being a mother. And, you know, how do we heal the parts of ourselves that we're trying to bring out and allow? So, you know, the being able to be vulnerable, being okay with our big emotions. And then how do we support our children with that? Because I feel like for me, I'm learning that, okay, I've also been a person who suppressed myself in the past. I've been too sensitive, too emotional. I cry at everything. Yeah. So I hardened very hard. I became very rigid, and I concealed that part of me. So here my children are with their big emotions. How do I have the capacity to support them with that when I'm not allowing that for myself? And I tell you, the other day, this is such a good example, actually, and I feel like it's a good example because it just showed me, it was just such a powerful moment. So I picked up my daughter from school and we were walking home and she had a bit of a cold. She was sniffly, and I was like, okay, we were meant to be going to a swimming lesson. And I thought, you know what, it's cold, you're sniffling, I don't think this is a good idea, you know? So I said, listen, babe, unfortunately, we're gonna have to miss swimming this week. When I say she put down one big piece of crying, I'm talking mouth was like, you know, tears coming out in the middle of the street. When barely home, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay. And one thing I'm practicing is just to keep coming back to what's coming up in me, because again, someone who's learning to look at myself in a much more loving and compassionate way, I recognize that through all of the suppressing myself, it's been because I've been told all my emotions have been too much. So as I'm connecting with myself, I'm allowing to feel, it's like coming back to my body, what is coming up in me by her displaying this big masterpiece in the street, you know what I'm saying? So I recognized that immediately. I wanted to shut her down. I was like, oh, look at that over there. She's in the middle of crying, And also, we're not far from home, so I'm realizing that, okay, I'm starting to think, okay, what are people going to think? What are people going to think? Because actually, that's what took me away from being present with her in that moment. It was the judgment of other people. They probably think, who is this woman? What is she doing to her? Is she being kidnapped? Is she all right? Because the person was crying, it was like, for me, it would be someone died, you know? And then again, like, look at that, trying to distract her. And actually what I was doing in that moment was silencing her. It was the way that I silenced myself because of the judgments about my experience. And the truth is, who was I to shut her down? Because she was expressing her pain. This was disappointing for her. She loves swimming. She loves swimming. So of course she's upset. But actually the intensity of her display was triggering me. It was triggering me, because for me it was too much. It was too much. That doesn't warrant. But actually it wasn't too much. And she really gave me an opportunity to connect with myself, because actually in what I'm doing with her is what I'm doing with me.
Yeah.
And I had to look at what ways do I silence myself? What ways do I not allow myself to express because I'm judging the intensity or how people are going to think it's going to be. And the more I practice presence, and I guess, you know, this is one of the blessings of being a mother. It's supporting me with this healing journey, you know, to really be with them where they are, because actually, once I reconnected with her and allowed her the space, the container to hold her in her upset, she felt safe. She got to release it, and we got to move on.
Yeah, exactly that. Don't know. I know it's sometimes I'm like, okay, so we've had these children, but we learn so much more. I learn more from my daughter than I feel like I'm pouring into her, because she holds me accountable. She questions, you know, me all of the time, you know, because for them, some of the things that we say so quickly in, you know, to ourselves, that's logical and it makes sense, but their minds are not there yet. So I wonder, I do wonder, you know, how sometimes I'm like, is the learning experience ever over? And the short answer is no. with these children, but I don't know. I've learned so much with my little one. She's not. I'm not a patient person. I'm definitely someone who, if I say I want it now, like now. And again, that is problematic, because people were made differently, and people don't necessarily have my setup. I am someone who's a go-getter, you know. So again, if I say I want something, I want it right this second. But when I'm putting those, and it's a demand literally on somebody else, and expecting them to maneuver and do, you know, as I would, it's really not, it's just not fair, you know. So I've had to learn to, again, you know, be very self-aware that I can be like that. And again, question my thinking and why I have to be that way. But I also feel like that's rooted in the fact that at times I've wanted someone to just take the wheel and literally be present and show up. And, you know, the fact is, I haven't always had that. And because I haven't had it, it's something that I lack, you know, and something that I wanted to be fulfilled. So I fulfill it myself. It's exhausting, you know, and I have to catch myself in the moment.
Do you think you ask for what you need?
No.
Do you think you know what you need?
Sometimes, yes. But for me, again, a lot of it is rooted in shame and guilt, because I'm like, but I should have that already. I shouldn't have to ask for that. Sometimes I don't, no. But I think it's also because I feel like sometimes I'm on a conveyor belt, so I don't necessarily always have that time to process and think, hold on, just stop. What is it that you actually want? But again, for me, it's about mapping out time. And normally for me, that's after bedtime, where yes, I could sit and obviously, you know, watch TV or whatever. But for me, journaling. I journal, I write. And I'll be honest, some of the stuff that I write in there, I don't necessarily ever want anybody to ever see, and they don't have to, you know, because it's very raw. But again, for me, once it's out, it's out. I think the worst thing I could possibly do is hold it in, because I have in the past held it in to the point of combustion. Yes. And then it's just like, oh my gosh, when really, if I'd managed this a little bit better before, we wouldn't have had to get to this point. Again, I feel like it's the idea that I can do it, and I'll just keep doing it, and I constantly challenge myself with that. Work, that's a new thing. I haven't worked a full-time job in a really long time. I've recently started a new role, and I found a nanny, which is she's absolutely amazing. And actually, you know, I feel like I struggle, like I have to write a list of tasks for her to do. And there is guilt attached to the list of tasks that I'm asking her to do. And the thing is, she's not free. I'm paying her for a service, but I have a problem I have a problem letting go. And I question, is it because I don't feel that that person can do what it is that, you know, I need her to do? Or is it just me? I have a problem letting go because I'm very used to always being present for myself, always having to show up. So it's
Yeah.
it's
So
hard.
is it? Sorry.
Yeah. No, go on. What were you going to ask?
No, I was going to say, yeah. So is it because you're asking her to do all these things, or something that you feel that you should be doing?
Doing, and there's guilt attached to that, but and it's they say the mother guilt never goes away, and to be honest, I'm not sure that it will. But I also understand that I'm allowed to be, because before a mother, I was Shemiah, right? And it's almost like I'm backtracking to who I was, although I show up differently now, right? So I've got, you know, more responsibility, and you know, I like to think I'm a little bit more intelligent and a little bit wiser. But I have to remember that before she was here, I was me, and that's okay. And I don't know when it stopped being okay. Does that make sense? Like, why
Yeah.
is it okay that I can feed into myself? It's like what we were speaking about the other day. Like, it's okay to go and get a new hairstyle or go and do my nails. But a lot of that before, there was a lot of guilt attached to that. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I do that, then she misses out on something. But then I had to question, hold on, if she's missing out on something, is it actually imperative that she has that thing? And a lot of the times it's like, no, it's okay. She doesn't need another pair of trainers. It's all right. She doesn't need actually any more clothes.
Yeah.
So for me, again, it's about balance. I don't think there's ever, you know, the right time to necessarily immerse yourself in work. However, what I don't want to happen, and again, this is something that I've seen, we spend all of this time nurturing all of our children, right? Which is great, okay? Mm-hmm. And then they grow up and they leave. And when they grow up and they leave, because you want them to obviously leave and have their own lives, you are left thinking, hold on, what have I got for myself? So for me, my journey is about how do I create the balance? So she thrives, but I thrive too, you know? So I'm not left, like I'm not, left, left behind in that sort of respect.
And actually the medicine in that is that you thrive, she can thrive. Because if you're not thriving, she can't, right?
Yeah.
How do we have to lead. We have to lead with that. So by you supporting yourself, getting your hair done, getting your nails done, these are your needs. Yeah, these are your needs. And I think anything that has guilt attached really isn't ours.
Yeah.
We have to question whose voice is that really? Who is saying she's going to suffer if you go and do something for yourself? Who is actually saying that? Where did we learn that? Where did we learn that we have to fulfill all of their needs and forget ourselves?
Yeah.
You know, and that had to have been modeled to us. That had to have been showed to us as the way to be and function. Listen, motherhood is an initiation in itself, And I don't think you can ever prepare for the journey that it brings into your life. Do you know what I mean? It's just impossible to think about that. And you know, it's going to be different for everybody. But I think, you know, what you said was key about finding that balance and questioning. I love that you journal. I think journaling is a beautiful tool to bring yourself, to see yourself. You know, I do that too. It really helps me to process and to release, to let it all out, and it's unfiltered. Because when we start putting those filters in, we're restricting ourselves, you know, and it's not about doing that. So it's like continuing to allow ourselves to have what we need, because then it shows our beautiful kids that they can also have that. They deserve to have that. That's their birthright, in fact.
Yeah, exactly that. You know, sometimes I think I should document all my life lessons that I've learned in the 8 years that she's been born.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I'd probably run out of like journal paper. But it's definitely motherhood. I enjoy being a mum, and I know, you know, some people find it more challenging than others. But for me, because I am quite a maternal person and I've always had children around me, it's something for me that I'll be honest, it does come quite easily. Like I naturally want to be present. I naturally want to do things. It's not, I never see it as very problematic. But I've had to realize I cannot do it all. Like physically, I cannot be everywhere all the time. And actually, it's quite unhealthy for me to adopt that whole, I can do it all by myself. I just think it's so unhealthy. And I know too many people that have tried to do it and we fail, you know? And it's not something that I want to continue. It's not something that I promote at all. I just wish there were more spaces where we were having these conversations. I wish that there were more people that wanted to be as open and as vulnerable, because I honestly believe when we speak, we learn and we grow. And in order for that to happen, we have to do the work, right? Absolutely. But again, social media doesn't necessarily help. I feel like we only ever, post the most positive things that are going. Not everyone, but in general, we post the most positive things, and it's because that's how we want to be seen, right? Yeah. But then I might post something really positive, have a conversation with someone, and it's a completely different conversation. Why is it that we don't feel like we can say where we're at in that moment and post that? Because again, I feel like for me anyway, when I'm posting things about my experience, although it's not very often, when I do, I feel like it resonates with people more, and people learn and people grow, and they're like, yep, I can identify with that. I just feel like if we had this helping hand sort of approach to people, because we're human, and we need more of that interdependent sort of relationship. I just feel like we, as a whole, we would be a better society, because it's almost saying, I actually see you for you, and it's okay not to be okay. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And I just feel like people just need to keep it a lot more real with the things that they're facing, how they're feeling. But I think it's also really healthy to understand that it's just a season. It literally is just a season, and it will pass. Sometimes those seasons, speaking from experience, have gone on a lot longer. However, the season has passed. And I feel like if I'm ever in a tricky space, it's probably because I'm supposed to be learning something from that. And it just keeps coming back for me personally until I've learned the lesson. But I'm not someone who surrenders to things quite easily. So there is something that's like patience, for example.
It's a practice.
Trust me, I feel like patience. I'll just be, it's just a continuous journey. But sometimes I'm like, you know what, Shemiah, take your time. And once you take your time, you get the result, that you want. But yeah, life.
Oh, Shemiah, you are amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing yourself to be vulnerable here. Yeah, because in speaking your truth, you're being yourself, and I value that about you. You know that. I hope you know that. You know it now if you don't.
I do.
And I respect the journey that you're on, to healing. It takes a lot of courage, and bravery. So I just want to honor you for picking up the mantelpiece and going ahead with that and carving out that space for yourself and leading by example for your daughter, because after all, she is coming up as a next generation who we want to thrive in this life. Like, there's no more suppression or oppression, right? It's like, no, you deserve to be seen, heard, witnessed in all of your glory, in all of the aspects of yourself. So I guess, just to sort of wrap this up a little bit and bring it to a close, I want to ask you, for anybody who is drawn to, to watch or listen to this, what would you share as being helpful to, you kind of touched on the tools that you've used, but to help people begin their healing, what has been pivotal for you?
The first thing for me I had to be very honest with myself. I had to have a very honest conversation with exactly where I was at. And for me, that was pen to paper. I had to say, Shemiah, you are not okay. What is actually bothering you? And it was things like, I've never really felt like how I am is enough. I always feel like, you know, so that was a big thing. Then I had to unpack that. So the first thing I would say, you need to get to the point where you can be very real and very honest with who you are. Then once you start unpacking it, seek help. I put off going to the doctors and having a conversation with well, they referred me to like, you know, the like CAMS or whatever it is, to have like, yeah, a therapist, sorry, to have a conversation for a really long time. And I know that's because my culture and the way that we've been raised is everything we do is in-house. But if I can't have a conversation with you about how I'm feeling, or if I can have the conversation, but I feel like you don't get it, it's not helpful. So we're still in the same situation. So for me, it took a lot. I had to ask for help, and I suppose once. I mean, it took years. I mean, literally years, like a couple of years before I had a conversation. But it started at being very real and very honest with how I was feeling, and that was hard. Yeah. So that's the first thing.
Powerful.
Yeah, I'm just thinking this. The second thing was making up my mind that how I currently was, I didn't want to be. Because I feel like once you've been in a negative state, a negative mind state for a long time, it becomes your routine, right? So I had to then change my way of thinking.
Yes.
So instead of saying, and it could be simple things, and I think this is why affirmations for me are really important, right? So instead of saying, oh, I don't have this, I don't have this, I had to literally be like, but I do have this and I do have that. And something as small as that changed the way my mind was thinking, and then, you know, would ultimately change my whole day. Because it's really easy to slip into the whole what you don't have. There's things that we don't have, but there are also a lot of people who have a lot less. So I had to always, for me, flip it, always draw for the positive as opposed to the negative. And it was challenging because, like you said, Shemiah, I see you as someone that's quite a positive person, but it hasn't always been like that. And for me, that has ultimately stemmed from the pressures that I've put on myself, because I'm like, well, I'm 35, I should be here, there, and wherever already. Yeah. And the fact is, I'm not there. I may get there, you know, but at the moment, this is where I am. And again, it's about that whole being present and being comfortable in my, you know, where I am. And that's fine. Everyone's journey is completely different. And I found, I compared myself a lot. Didn't necessarily say it out loud. I would compare myself to my peers and what they had.
That's a big one.
And I mean, it did nothing for my mental health, you know. You know, mental health for me also as well. I'm sorry, I'm digressing on it. Sorry. We'll leave it there.
You sure?
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Because I feel like it presents itself and it shows up. Mental health for me presents itself and shows up in completely different ways. And I know that if people looked at me, they would never say, oh gosh, Shemiah struggles with anxiety. They would never say that, because how I present doesn't necessarily show that. Do you know what I mean? Whenever people meet me, I'm happy and smiley and bubbly and vibrant, but I know what's going on inside. And I think for me, it's about being able to say, do you know what? I'm feeling a little bit unnerved. I am feeling anxious. And I'm not really sure how I'm going to show up or be present, but I need to kind of give you the FYI. And I just feel being more honest with myself has helped me tremendously.
I feel you. I so feel you. I really, really do. And I think that that is gold there, literally. You know, because if we can't be honest with ourselves, how can we be honest with others, and how can we even identify where we need to begin, right?
Yeah.
You know? And again, honoring you, Shemiah, because what you're doing is actually you've recognized that this impact on being a strong Black woman has been filtered down through the generations.
Yep.
And you've said, no more.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're confronting yourself.
Yeah.
And you're seeking help.
Yeah.
Yeah. That takes, like I said, real bravery and courage. And I commend you. Yeah. And you know, it's difficult. Not many people do this work because it takes a lot, you know, it really does take a lot. And I just, thank you for showing up and being yourself. And you know, I like I said, thank you. I really value you, and what you're able to give to your daughter, that's powerful. Like, you know, you've started a whole new cycle of awesome belief systems that deserve to be anchored, that deserve to be nurtured.
I hope so. I really do hope so, because the pressure I've definitely felt being, you know, her example. I was thinking, oh, goodness, like, can I do this? Like it's a lot. Like, I don't. Sometimes I'm like, I want to sign out. I don't even want to do it anymore. But it's just like, you know, once I detach from other people's expectations of who I'm supposed to show up and be, then I'm good. I do what works for us. And for me, that's all that matters. What works for us. So
Beautiful. Shemiah, you've just been powerhouse. So insightful, so much wisdom, and so many gems. We're going to finish it there, because that last bit, you know, it has to be what's right for you, right? That's it. That literally is it in a nutshell. So again, thank you so much, and I hope to be in more conversation like this. You know, it's healing, and I think it's time that we go back to the ancient ways and bring the village forward. You know, find our community so that we can learn from each other and heal together. I don't think that it was ever meant to be in isolation. No. So the sun's shining on you now, boy. Okay.